Hey there everybody, I'm back with another video log, though this is going to be decidedly different from my previous video log. In this, what I would like to do is I'd like to spend a little bit of time addressing a question that I commonly get asked, and I certainly don't mind giving responses to this question, but I figured I'd answer it here in video form so that I can point people to this as, point people to this as a response to this question. And the question that I get most often as a powerlifter is, why do you squat with such a narrow stance? And people are fascinated by my narrow stance. And just so you know, when I squat now, my stance is such that the heels of my feet are, on average, I would say about 4 inches apart. Okay, so that is my stance width. It is whatever shoulder width is, it is decidedly less than that. So I squat with what is an unusually narrow stance. And a lot of people always ask me, well, why do you use this stance? And there are 2 ways in which I can respond to this question. And the first way is the simple answer, and the simple answer is because a narrow stance is the stance that I'm strongest with. So I'm not doing it to show off. I'm not doing it because I want to impress somebody or because I want to be seen as sort of a freak show that can do this little parlor trick with an impressive amount of weight. I simply squat this way because it is, for me, my strongest squat stance, and I feel good doing it. I don't really have any issues training this way, and my numbers continue to improve at a very high rate for me while squatting with the narrow stance. Okay. Now, the longer answer is to say that I didn't start squatting with a super narrow stance. Okay. I've been training for powerlifting for maybe 4 years now. I've been competing in the sport since 2009. That was my first meet. And when I started competing in the sport, I was not using a narrow stance. I was using a normal shoulder width, or even a little bit more than shoulder width, style stance, okay? And my stance gradually closed over time, okay? And even over the last year and a half, I have gone from having a pretty normal stance to, excuse me, I'm yawning. Topic bores me. To having a really narrow stance, okay? But that has progressed over time, and what I have done is exactly what I advise other people to do when they ask me, should I use a narrow stance? And my answer is, when you want to start training a given lift, you want to always start in the middle, okay? And by that I mean you want to start with a moderate technical approach to that lift. You want to, in terms of squat width, start with a normal, moderate, shoulder width squat stance, okay? You don't want to start learning the lift going super wide, because that's what somebody at Westside Barbell does. You don't want to start learning the lift going super narrow, because that's what Keough does, okay? You want to start with a normal stance width, okay? You want to perform the lift in a normal fashion, okay? You want to try and perform it as if you were performing an ideal example of that lift. So try to be as technically perfect as possible. And as you gain experience with that lift, you will slowly discover what your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and how you can modify that lift to take advantage of those, okay? Take advantage of those strengths. So when you watch me lift, I use a squat stance that is very narrow, and that has occurred inch by inch over a span of a few years, okay? And it has slowly become the stance that you see now. When I bench press, I use a very wide grip, okay? But it wasn't always the case, all right? My grip width slowly moved out, and I made sure throughout my training, up until the last few months or so, to continue to incorporate close grip and normal grip bench training into my work, all right? When you look at my deadlift is done conventional with a very narrow stance and a very rounded back, okay? I do purposefully round my back when I deadlift, all right? But I wouldn't suggest for a lifting neophyte to come in and pull with a rounded back and with a very narrow stance, because that's what I do or because that's what somebody else does, all right? You want to start with a more moderate stance, okay? You want to start with a neutral spine, and you want to slowly, over time, figure out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, okay? And your strengths can be a matter of muscle groups that are dominant. It can be a matter of leveraging and how you take advantage of your leverages. When you see me squat with a real narrow stance, you have to understand that not everybody is built to squat with that stance. Number one, it's really difficult for me to break parallel with that stance, okay? Because of the balance I have with a low bar position, I am basically bottoming out to break parallel. I can't squat much deeper because I can't keep good balance on it. The only way I could keep good balance squatting deeper with such a narrow stance would be to assume a high bar position and to keep my torso more vertical. But I lose a lot of strength doing that. So I squat with this style because of my leverages, because of how I'm proportioned and put together, okay? I have really short femurs. This is something that I've noticed over time, okay? And I also have really strong and developed spinal erectors, all right? I'm certainly not an impressive physical specimen by any stretch, but I do have, proportionately speaking, a pretty well-developed back, pretty well-developed traps, and pretty well-developed spinal erectors, and I take advantage of those, and I use my spinal erector strength when I perform, say, a squat with a really narrow stance, okay? So I've taken advantage of how I'm put together, my leveraging, all right, and my dominant muscle groups in order to perform the squat in such a way that I can maximize my abilities in it, all right? It's not something I recommend for everybody. If you want to try narrowing your stance, go for it, okay? But what I would advise against you doing is going from a shoulder width stance to trying to squat like me, okay? You don't want to do that, all right? You want to go from a shoulder width stance to a shoulder width stance minus maybe half an inch on each side, all right? So you bring each foot in half an inch, all right? And you squat slightly narrower and see how that feels. If your numbers go up, if you feel stronger doing it, you might want to continue to, over time, bring your stance in, all right? But again, it's a matter of personal preference. These lifts are highly individualized, all right? For every rule, whether it be strength-based or physiological, for every rule regarding what proper technique is, what proper form is, all right, what one should be doing in training, there's usually somebody out there that is performing at a very high level in such a way that they are breaking said rule. And it's not always a good idea, okay? But you could always find somebody like myself who doesn't take a traditional approach to a low bar squat, which is open up your knees, force your knees out, spread the floor, take a wider stance, weight displaced on the outsides of your feet angled out in case you need help opening up your hips, all right? Sitting back as far as possible, pretending you're sitting back even onto a toilet. That's usually the analogy that is used, rather than sitting down, okay? Keeping your chest up, keeping your back arched so that that bar is above your hips, all right? Keeping your head placed back, using your posterior chain to the best of your ability, keeping your knees from drifting forward. These are all the characteristics that we associate with a traditional low bar style squat as it is supposed to be performed, all right? But you might not find that that approach is best for you, all right? I squat with a low bar position, but I do not do a lot of those other things, all right? And it's working for me, and it's gonna continue to work for me because I just squatted 430 for 6 yesterday, and it went really well, and I've hit rep PRs each of the last 3 weeks, and I think when I test my squat soon, I think you're going to see me hit a squat in the 510 to 515 range. I think that's probably what I'm going to be capable of. I'm not going to guarantee that I hit it, because with a max attempt, you know, you never know. You hope for the best, but I think I'm in a position now to squat over 5. You know, I've squatted 475 for 2, 450 for 4, and 430 for 6 my last 3 weeks. Did 505 for 3 with reverse bands, which is way above what I've ever done in the past. So it's working for me. If you want to try it, see if it works out for you. But again, transition slowly, and in all things, in powerlifting and in life, start in the middle, find out where your strengths and weaknesses are, and then move along the spectrum, either to one pole or to another, based on what you feel most comfortable with and what you feel strongest with. That's it. That's all I've got. Hopefully that answers your question. Otherwise, I don't know what to tell you, because I don't have a better response than that. Take care. I'll have more videos for you soon.